Hi, I'm Lucia. And this isn't just a story about betrayal. It's about the moment I realized my own father wanted me dead. I remember the machines beeping, the taste of metal in my throat, the cold air burning my lungs. Then his voice, calm, detached, said, "I'm out of money. Pull the plug." I couldn't move, couldn't scream, but I heard every word. And when the nurse reached for the tubes, what I whispered next made her freeze and call the police. Before we dive in, tell me, what time are you listening to this and where are you tuning in from? Drop a comment below, because what happened after that whisper changed everything. The first thing I remember is the noise, steady, mechanical, unhuman. A soft beeping, like a heartbeat that didn't belong to me. Then the hiss of air, slow and rhythmic, filling lungs that felt borrowed. My mind floated in thick fog. I tried to move, to blink, anything. But nothing happened. My body felt like it was buried under concrete. And there was light, sterile and cold. I knew that smell, the sharp sting of disinfectant, the chill of metal rails, an ICU. The words formed slowly in my mind, dragging behind the sound of machines. A memory flickered. A car, headlights too close, glass breaking like rain. Then silence. I tried to swallow. Nothing. My throat burned around something. Plastic. A tube. My chest rose, but not because I willed it to. I was breathing, but not living. Panic built quietly inside me, trapped without an exit. Then I heard it. The footsteps. Sharp, deliberate, familiar. My father's. He had a way of walking that made people step aside before seeing his face. Always in control. Always pressed shirts and polished shoes. I wanted to cry, to call his name. He'd come to see me. He'd tell me I was safe. The door clicked open. A man's voice, not his, spoke first. Someone medical, calm, explaining something I couldn't catch. Then came his voice, cool, low, and steady. "You said her insurance is maxed out?" The doctor hesitated. "We can apply for emergency coverage, Mr. Venn, but—" My father cut him off. "No, I can't keep paying. I'm out of money. Pull the plug." The words fell flat, without tremor. A businessman closing a deal. I thought maybe I misheard. I tried to scream, to tell him I was here, that I could hear him, but the only sound was the hiss of the ventilator. My heart rate spiked on the monitor. Beep, beep, beep. Faster now. I felt a tear roll down my temple, pooling in my hair. The doctor glanced at the screen. Her vitals reacted. "It's just reflex," my father replied. His voice didn't even waver. "She's gone. It's time." Inside me, everything screamed. Memories of birthdays, his voice calling me pumpkin, his hand steadying my bike when I was 6. And now, the same voice asking them to end me. Across the room, I caught the sound of someone breathing differently, a soft, shaking breath. The nurse. Her badge glinted when she moved closer to the monitors. "Sir," she said quietly, "the readings. She might be responsive." My father's tone hardened. "She's not. You're seeing what you want to see. Do your job." The nurse didn't move. She just stood there, hand hovering near the ventilator tube. I could sense her hesitation, like warmth in a freezing room. "Maria," the doctor said sharply. "Step back, please." But she didn't. She leaned closer to me, whispering so softly it brushed my ear. "If you can hear me, sweetheart, give me a sign." My entire body screamed to obey. Nothing worked. Not a blink, not a twitch. Only the racing of my heart. Beep, beep, beep. I focused every ounce of will on my lungs. My lips parted just enough for air to escape. "Stop!" It came out like the faintest breeze. Maria jerked back. "Oh my God, she's awake!" The doctor froze. My father's chair scraped against the floor. "She's gone," he barked. "Don't make a scene." But Maria was already pressing the red button on the wall. The alarms started wailing, shrill, relentless. She grabbed my hand, her palm warm, firm. "You're okay, honey. I've got you. Just hold on." My father stepped back, his voice rising now, not calm anymore. "You'll regret this," he snapped. But the hallway was already filling with footsteps, the sound of security and something else, sirens, faint but growing. My vision blurred, lights smeared together. Maria's voice was the last thing I heard. "They're coming. You're safe now." And just before darkness closed in again, I saw him, my father, standing by the door, face pale, jaw tight. For the first time, there was something in his eyes I'd never seen before. Fear. As they wheeled my bed away from him, I finally saw the fear. Not in my eyes, but in his. They moved me down the hall, wheels squeaking against polished linoleum, fluorescent lights blinking overhead like an endless interrogation. I caught one last glimpse of his back. My father, hands in his pockets, head slightly bowed. He didn't try to follow. That alone told me everything. The next thing I remember is waking in a quieter room. The light was softer, dimmed to a bluish glow. Machines still hummed, but slower now, steadier, as if they were waiting for me to decide whether to keep breathing. My throat ached. Each inhale scratched against the memory of that tube. The oxygen hissed gently, a reminder that I was alive, somehow. Outside the glass panel, I saw movement, a uniformed officer speaking with the doctor. And beside them stood my father, his arms crossed, nodding like a man caught in an unfortunate misunderstanding. He gestured toward me once, lips moving, expression rehearsed. The officer wrote something down. I couldn't hear the words, but the calmness in his posture chilled me more than any ICU breeze ever could. Why was he so calm? Why wasn't he shaken or relieved? The door opened quietly. Maria slipped in, still wearing her scrubs, her eyes rimmed red. She hesitated before approaching, like she wasn't sure I was real. "Hey, sweetheart," she whispered, voice soft but trembling. "I called 911 that night because something just didn't feel right." I couldn't answer. My voice was still gone, my body heavy, but I managed to lift my hand an inch, just enough to press my fingers around hers. Her face broke into a small, tired smile. "That's good," she said, squeezing back. "You're getting stronger." For the first time since waking up, I didn't feel completely alone. From behind the curtain that separated my bed from the rest of the room, I heard the murmur of voices again. My father's tone had changed, gentle now, lined with a sorrow that didn't belong to him. "I misunderstood the doctor," he said, his voice carrying perfectly for my ears alone. "I was scared. I thought she was gone. I panicked." The officer murmured something back, a question I couldn't make out. Gareth's sigh was dramatic, a little too precise. "You have to understand, I've been under tremendous stress. My daughter's accident, the bills, the confusion." The word accident made my pulse quicken. He spoke it too easily, too soon. Maria's hand shifted in mine, signaling that she heard it too. When she turned slightly, I caught the faint reflection of her phone screen tucked behind her clipboard. She was recording. The conversation outside continued. I heard another nurse comforting my father, telling him it wasn't his fault, that these things happen. Then Gareth's voice again, quieter but clear enough to slice through the air. "If only that truck driver hadn't run the red light." The nurse stopped speaking. There was a long pause. The officer cleared his throat. And no one had mentioned a truck. The crash report hadn't even been released yet. But my father, he already knew. Maria's eyes met mine, wide, sharp with understanding. Neither of us spoke, but something shifted between us. The seed of suspicion hardened into truth. That night, after the hallway lights dimmed and visiting hours ended, Maria returned. She closed the blinds and pulled a chair close to my bed. "Lucia," she whispered, "there's something else. Someone switched your IV bag before the crash report came in. I saw it on the log sheet, but the entry was deleted this morning." A tremor ran through me. My heart monitor began to tick faster. I searched her face for any hint of exaggeration, but she looked terrified. "Do you know who?" I mouthed, barely forming the words. She hesitated. "I can't say yet. But be careful. Not everyone here is on your side." As she left, I stared at the ceiling, the memory of that night unspooling in broken flashes, my father's voice on the phone, telling me to stop by his office to sign something quick about the insurance. The scent of rain, the glare of headlights, the sudden screech of tires. Maybe it wasn't an accident. Maybe he'd been waiting for it. The next morning, the door opened again. Sunlight spilled across the sheets. My father stood there holding a bouquet of lilies, the kind they arrange at funerals. His smile was soft, practiced. "It's good to see you alive, sweetheart." He placed the flowers on the table beside me, his eyes scanning the machines as if measuring how much longer they'd keep me breathing. I let one tear slide down, not from emotion, but control. I forced it, just enough to look fragile. Under the blanket, my hands trembled, but not from weakness, from realization. If love could sound rehearsed, his did. His words kept echoing long after he left the room, bouncing against the sterile walls of my mind. "It's good to see you alive." It sounded sweet, but I could hear the calculation underneath, like a man rehearsing lines for an audience he didn't know was already gone. That night, I couldn't sleep. The monitors whispered their rhythm, and outside the window, the rain began to fall again, soft at first, then harder, tapping against the glass in sync with the pounding inside my chest. And then, like a movie reel clicking into place, my memory started playing pieces I hadn't asked for. Headlights, wet asphalt, my own reflection in the windshield, tired, distracted, but alive. Then his voice, on speakerphone, calm, confident, familiar. "Just sign it, honey. It's routine paperwork for the company car. You'll have to do it before the renewal expires." I remember laughing lightly, teasing him for being so formal. "Dad, it's almost 10 at night." "Company deadlines don't wait, sweetheart. I'll send it to your email. Just sign and we're good." The line went silent for a moment, then his tone softened. "I'm proud of you, you know." I smiled then, believing him, believing every word. When I opened my eyes again, the sound of the rain merged with the hum of the hospital lights. My hand trembled against the blanket. That form, it wasn't about a car, it was about me. He'd asked for my signature just hours before the crash, and now I was lying in a hospital bed that he tried to empty of me. Maria came in the next morning, looking exhausted. She was holding a stack of charts, moving quietly so the day nurse wouldn't notice her taking longer than usual by my bed. Her eyes scanned the top sheet, and then her expression changed, something between shock and fury. She folded one of the papers, slipped it into her pocket, and smiled faintly when she caught me watching. "Rest, okay? Don't push yourself." When she left, I heard the faint buzz of her phone in the hallway. She was calling someone who might know what she'd just found. A few hours later, my father walked in again. The scent of his cologne filled the room first, that crisp, corporate kind of smell, mixed with something else I couldn't place right away. He sat down beside me, taking my hand like a father who'd been through hell. "You scared me," he said softly. "Don't do that again, okay?" He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. His thumb brushed across my wrist, slow, rehearsed. That's when I caught it. The faint trace of gasoline, not hospital disinfectant, Not car oil, gasoline. Sharp, unmistakable. I knew that smell from that night. The same one that lingered when the car exploded against the guardrail. He leaned closer. You don't remember much, do you? I let my gaze blur, pretending confusion. Bits and pieces, I whispered, voice raw from the tube that had been there days ago. Oh, it's all fog. Good, he said quickly. Maybe that's for the best. His tone was almost too casual, too relieved. From the corner of my eye, I saw movement. Maria, standing just beyond the glass, pretending to organize supplies. Her phone was angled ever so slightly toward him, recording again. He straightened, adjusting his tie, the mask slipping just long enough for me to see the irritation underneath. I've handled everything, Lucia. The bills, the press, even the car insurance. You don't need to worry about a thing. Insurance. The word hit me like an echo from that phone call. I had signed something. I remembered scrolling through an online document, his company's letterhead, digital lines, my name beside his. The label, temporary insurance authorization. I hadn't read it all. I'd just clicked sign, because that's what good daughters do. My head pounded. He'd made himself the beneficiary. Hours later, after he left, Maria returned and closed the door. She took the folded note from her pocket and placed it in my hand. It's from your file, she whispered. I shouldn't even have it. The paper read, Insurance beneficiary, Gareth Venn, Soul. My stomach clenched. It wasn't an accident. It was a plan. The pieces rearranged themselves in my mind. The phone call, the crash, his calm voice asking them to pull the plug. He hadn't panicked because he wasn't losing anything. He was collecting. I felt something inside me shift, something heavy and old cracking open. I wasn't the helpless daughter anymore. I was a witness who'd been left alive by mistake. The next evening he came again. This time, the flowers were white roses. I pretended to sleep until he leaned closer, his hand brushing my hair. You're going to be fine, he whispered. We just need to move past this. Forget it ever happened. I opened my eyes then, just slightly, enough for him to see the look in them. You almost got away with it, I said, my voice no louder than the hiss of the oxygen. He froze. For the first time, he looked straight at me, not as his daughter, but as someone who knew. That's when the real danger began, not from what he did, but from what he feared I might do. That night, sleep didn't come easy. Every time I closed my eyes, I felt his stare lingering. Like the air itself remembered his presence. The real danger wasn't the crash anymore, it was the silence that followed it. Days blurred into one another, marked by the steady rhythm of rehab sessions and whispered checkups. The doctors said I was improving. Stronger fingers, better grip, a few steps with assistance. They praised me for my progress, but I could feel it wasn't just my body they wanted healed. It was my compliance. Every movement burned, every breath scraped, but I refused to look weak in front of anyone, especially him. When Gareth walked in carrying another bouquet, I knew it wasn't because he cared. The man who'd once told doctors to pull the plug wasn't suddenly sentimental. You're strong, he said, arranging the flowers by my bed. Just like your mother was. You'll be home soon. His voice had a warmth that didn't match the cold glance he gave toward the nurse's station. It wasn't affection. It was control. Every word was a subtle test, each smile a warning. He brushed a strand of hair from my forehead like a father in an old movie, but his eyes darted toward the hallway camera. I realized he was performing, not for me, but for anyone watching. After he left, I sat there staring at those flowers. They looked beautiful, but I couldn't stop thinking about how easy it would be to hide poison among them. The next morning, as sunlight filtered through half-drawn blinds, I heard him again, this time outside my room. His tone was smooth but firm, the kind of voice that sounded like authority. She's confused, he told Dr. Klein. Probably post-traumatic stress. The sooner she's discharged, the better. Hospitals aren't good for her. I could see their silhouettes through the glass, him standing tall, confident, and the doctor shifting uncomfortably. Maria had been walking by with a chart in hand. She froze. I saw her eyes narrow before she stepped forward. "Sir, she's not ready to leave yet. Her blood pressure spikes when—" Gareth turned to her with that calm, cutting smile. "You're a nurse, not a detective. Maybe stay in your lane." Her mouth tightened, but she didn't respond. She simply walked away. Later that day, she came into my room pretending to tidy up. "He's pushing for an early release," she said under her breath. "Something's not right, Lucia." I already knew. Every muscle in my body ached from the effort of pretending not to. That evening, while the staff changed shifts, Maria slipped into the administration office. She didn't tell me, but I figured it out later from the look in her eyes when she came back. Her face was pale, her hands trembling as she handed me a folded napkin. On it were 4 words, written in shaky pen. He bribed the admin. She had found the hospital log, my file, tampered with. The note about him requesting to pull the plug was deleted, erased like it never happened. She'd recorded the computer screen, risking everything to keep proof. Meanwhile, I began to notice new faces in the hallway. One man stood out, a tall figure in a gray suit, holding a newspaper but never turning a page. He wasn't staff. His shoes were too polished, his stare too deliberate. When our eyes met, he looked away, then pretended to take a call. I wasn't paranoid. Gareth had sent someone to watch me. During therapy the next morning, I started writing notes, small ones, scrawled on napkins or tissue paper when no one was looking. My hands still trembled, but the words were clear enough. "Don't let them send me home. He'll try again." I folded them tightly, tucking them beneath my pillow. That night, when Maria came for her last rounds, I met her eyes and nodded toward the bed. She found the notes, read them in silence, and whispered, "I'll keep you safe, even if I have to lose my job." Her voice cracked, and for a second, I wanted to believe that was possible. The next day, everything felt heavier. The air, the tension, the unspoken threats. I could sense Gareth was close before I even saw him. The faint scent of his cologne, oak and steel, filled the room moments before he stepped through the door. He looked around, gaze flicking between me and Maria. His smile didn't reach his eyes. "What are you two whispering about?" Maria didn't flinch. "About how miracles don't happen twice," she said, voice steady but sharp as glass. For a moment, the mask slipped. His jaw tightened, eyes narrowing before he caught himself. "You should get some rest," he muttered, his tone clipped. "Both of you." He left the room slower than usual, but the tension he carried stayed behind like smoke. As the door shut, Maria exhaled, the weight of her defiance hanging in the air. I looked at her and whispered, "He knows." She nodded. "Then we move faster." That night, I didn't sleep. I could hear footsteps in the hall, the shuffle of papers at the nurse's station, the low hum of wheels moving down the corridor. Something was being arranged. The next day I was gone from the hospital, but not because I was healed. They said I was being transferred for private recovery. I didn't get a choice in the matter. Papers were signed without my signature, bags packed without my approval. When the nurse wheeled me outside, the air felt heavy, almost staged, like the world had decided to play along with his lie. The car waiting for me wasn't an ambulance. It was my father's black Lincoln, spotless as always. Gareth stood beside it, sunglasses hiding whatever expression he wore. "You'll rest better at home," he said simply. Home. When we pulled up the long driveway, the mansion looked smaller than I remembered, but colder, emptier. The polished floors still gleamed, but the air smelled different now. Antiseptic mixed with my mother's old perfume, the scent trapped in walls that no longer remembered warmth. He greeted me at the door with a practiced smile, the kind that used to fool guests at dinner parties. Home sweet home, he murmured, steadying my wheelchair. I promised your mother I'd always protect you. The way he said protect made my stomach twist. Inside, everything had been prepared. A hospital bed in my old room. Bottles of medication lined up neatly on the nightstand. And standing beside the bed was a woman I'd never seen before. She was in her late 50s, hair pinned back, eyes sharp behind her glasses. This is Doris, my father said. She's your caregiver for now. Doris smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. We'll make sure you're comfortable, she said softly. And for some reason, I believed she meant, we'll make sure you're quiet. That night, when the house went still, I tried to sleep. But something kept me awake. A faint clicking sound, rhythmic and unnatural. It took me a moment to realize it wasn't in my head, it was above me. A small red light blinked from the corner near the mantel. I turned my face toward the wall, pretending not to notice. The next morning, I looked around carefully, one above the bookshelf, another in the hallway mirror, tiny lenses disguised as safety sensors. He hadn't brought me home for care, he'd brought me here to watch me. When I reached for my phone, it was gone. My charger, too. Doris, I asked, trying to sound calm. Did you take my phone? She glanced at me over her glasses. Mr. Venn said it needed to be checked. You've been confused lately. Medication can do that. Medication. That word again. I could almost hear his voice feeding her the line. By the third day, every call I tried to make went to voicemail. Every window latch was locked. Every word I spoke to Doris found its way back to him, because he always seemed to know. He'd stop by each evening around 6, always the same routine: flowers, polite questions, a kiss on the forehead that made my skin crawl. You're doing great, he'd say. Dr. Klein agrees you're getting better every day. We'll have you back to normal soon. I smiled when he did, but inside, I was burning. Dr. Klein. The same doctor who'd stood silent while Gareth told him to discharge me. Later that week, while Doris was cleaning, she left one of the office drawers unlocked. Curiosity wasn't bravery, it was survival. When she went outside for her cigarette break, I wheeled closer and pulled it open. Inside were files, my name on them. Dozens of pages. Psychiatric evaluation, Lucia Venn, unfit for independent living. Recommendation, long-term supervision advised. Diagnosis, delusional trauma response. Every page was signed by Dr. Klein, the same looping signature, the same stamp. But one thing didn't fit: the dates. They were from the week I was still unconscious. I held the papers to the light. The ink didn't match, the pressure marks uneven. A forgery. I slipped one document under my mattress before Doris came back inside. When she did, she gave me that same thin smile. You should get some rest, dear. You look tired. I wanted to tell her I wasn't tired. I was terrified, but I couldn't show it. So I played along. I ate what they gave me, nodded when they spoke, let them think I was fading into the docile patient they wanted me to be. At night, when I couldn't sleep, I mapped the house in my mind. The blind spots between cameras, the creak in the hallway floor, the timing of Doris's smoke breaks. I noticed where my father left his briefcase each night, by the study door, right under the painting of my mother. Every sound became a clue, every silence, a weapon. On the 5th night, he left for a meeting. I could tell by the way he buttoned his coat that it wasn't business. It was strategy. He wanted me to believe I was alone and safe. I wasn't. But I also wasn't broken anymore. When the front door closed, I turned on the TV for background noise, some old movie playing low enough to cover the sound of my whisper. You wanted silence, I said softly. Let's see what you do when I speak. I reached under the mattress and pulled out the forged report, my fingers tracing the fake signature. My reflection on the dark TV screen looked unfamiliar, eyes sharper, calmer. He thought he was watching me, But from that night on, I started watching him back. The next knock on the door wasn't his. It was the police asking about the forged reports. For a moment, I thought I could finally breathe. I thought maybe Maria had done it, had reached someone, had found the courage to expose him. My heart raced with something I hadn't felt in weeks. Relief. Finally, I whispered. Someone believes me. But the look on Gareth's face told me otherwise. He wasn't surprised. He wasn't afraid. He was prepared. 2 officers stood in the doorway, their expressions polite, cautious. Gareth greeted them with the kind of warmth that made strangers lower their guard. "Officers," he said, shaking hands as if they were old acquaintances. "Please, come in. My daughter's been having a difficult time since the accident." He spoke softly, like a man who cared too much. "She's been through a lot of trauma. Sometimes she writes stories about me hurting her. It's her way of coping." My throat tightened. "That's not true," I said quickly, pushing myself upright in the wheelchair. "He forged reports. He bribed someone at the hospital." The taller officer glanced at me with an expression that wasn't sympathy. It was pity. Gareth sighed, shaking his head just enough to seem patient. "You see, this is what I meant. She's confused. The doctors warned me. PTSD can make the mind twist things." I wanted to scream. I wanted to rip the calm from his face. Instead, I grabbed the folded paper I'd hidden under the mattress and thrust it toward them. "Here, read this. It says I'm unfit for independent living. But the signature's fake. The dates." Before I could finish, Gareth pulled a folder from his briefcase. "Actually," he said, handing it to the officers, "we've already had a follow-up evaluation from another doctor. Here's the official one." They flipped through it, nodding slightly. The room felt like it was tilting. My words came out in gasps. "He's lying." "That's what he does. He tried to kill me. Listen, please, the car." The female officer held up her hand gently. "Ma'am, you've been under a lot of stress. Maybe it's best if you rest." Rest. That word again. Always their solution. Silence disguised as care. The more I spoke, the more unhinged I sounded. The truth had become my cage, and every word I said just locked another bar into place. They left a few minutes later, promising to review the evidence. Gareth closed the door behind them and turned to me with that smooth, empty smile. "You shouldn't talk to strangers about family business," he said quietly. "It only makes things worse." He adjusted his tie, calm as ever, and walked out, leaving the echo of his footsteps behind. That night, I didn't hear from Maria. I tried calling her from the landline in the study, but the number had been disconnected. The next morning, Gareth's voice floated down the hallway. I couldn't see him, but his words carried through the air like a knife wrapped in silk. "She's gone," he said into the phone. "That nurse, suspended. She won't bother us again." My stomach dropped. He'd done it. He'd removed the only person who'd ever believed me. I sat by the window until dusk, staring at the fog creeping over the garden. The silence inside that house pressed against me until it felt like it was breathing down my neck. Maybe he was right. Maybe I was broken. I whispered it to my reflection. Maybe I am. The face in the glass didn't argue. It just looked tired, hollow, older than I remembered. But then, something caught my eye. A tiny blinking red light on the edge of the bracelet around my wrist. I hadn't noticed it before. Maria had fastened that bracelet before I left the hospital. "For your heart rate," she'd said with a wink. I remembered her hand lingering a moment too long, as if she wanted me to notice something she couldn't say out loud. My heart pounded. Could it be recording? I held it closer to the lamp. The light blinked once, then twice, then stayed solid green when I pressed the side button. A faint vibration pulsed beneath my skin. A small, disbelieving smile crossed my lips. "If no one believes me," I whispered, "I'll make them hear me." The house around me stayed silent, but for the first time, I wasn't afraid of it. The next morning, I walked into the police station, this time wearing proof. It was still early, the kind of quiet hour when the world hasn't fully decided what kind of day it wants to be. I clutched the bracelet in my hand, the same one Maria had fastened around my wrist weeks ago. The metal felt cold, heavier than I remembered, like it carried more than evidence. It carried every sleepless night, every humiliation, every whisper of doubt. I told myself not to shake. "Stay calm," I whispered under my breath. "Just show them the truth." The officer at the front desk looked up, polite but wary. "Can I help you, ma'am?" "Yes," I said, setting the bracelet on the counter. "I have evidence of a crime. My father, Gareth Venn, he tried to have me declared insane. This bracelet recorded him admitting it." For a second, the man blinked, unsure if I was serious. Then he nodded, motioning for another officer to escort me to an interview room. The room was cold, the kind of sterile gray that made you feel smaller. I sat at the metal table while they connected the bracelet to a laptop. My heart pounded as I heard the soft click. "This will prove it," I said, voice trembling but certain. The first officer hit play. Static. I frowned. "No, wait, maybe it's the wrong file." He tried again. The speakers hissed, sputtered, and then nothing. Just silence. "That's impossible," I murmured. "There were words." He said, "End it. I can't afford her." "You have to hear it." The officers exchanged glances, the kind that said, "We've seen this before." "Maybe it was corrupted," one offered gently. "Sometimes data doesn't save properly." But I knew better. That silence wasn't random. It was intentional. The longer I sat there, the more their expressions shifted, from interest to pity. My proof was gone, erased by invisible hands I couldn't fight. I could almost feel Gareth's influence seeping into this room, tightening its grip on me. When I left the station, I could barely breathe. My mind replayed the sound that should have been there, the voice I remembered in that hospital room. "End it. I can't afford her." The words weren't just memory, they were a scar. I could still see the shape of his silhouette against the ICU monitor's glow, his hand on the doctor's shoulder, calm, calculating. And now, just like that, even the truth had vanished. Outside, the morning light felt cruelly bright. I sat on the curb beside the station, clutching the useless bracelet, my heart sinking into that hollow space where hope used to live. "Ms. Venn?" a voice said quietly. I turned. A man in plain clothes stood a few feet away, holding a paper cup of coffee. His badge flashed briefly beneath his jacket. "Detective Shaw," he introduced himself, lowering his voice. "Walk with me." We crossed the parking lot in silence until we reached the far side, away from the cameras. His tone changed, softer, more deliberate. "You're not crazy," he said. "I saw your file. And I know that bracelet didn't just malfunction." My chest tightened. "Then why didn't they help me in there?" "Because," he said, scanning the street before leaning closer, "your father's been paying people, not just at the hospital. Here too, high up." I stared at him, disbelief curdling into fear. "You mean the police?" He nodded once. "You're being watched, Lucia. Even now, if you want to survive this, you have to make him believe he's already won." My voice shook. "You want me to pretend I lost?" "No," he said, eyes steady. "I want you to make him think you did." Before I could respond, he slipped a small business card into my hand. On it, a name and a number. "Jonah, tech consultant. Downtown. Don't call him. Just go tonight." Then he turned and walked away, blending into the morning crowd as if he'd never been there. That evening, I did as he said. I met Jonah in a quiet cafe that smelled of burnt coffee and rain. He looked about 60, with a scar across his temple and hands that trembled slightly when he lifted his mug. "You Lucia?" he asked, voice rough but kind. I nodded and handed him the bracelet. It was recording when he spoke. Then it wasn't. He took it gently, examining it like something sacred. "You've got fragments," he murmured after a moment, plugging it into a small device. "Looks like someone wiped the main file but didn't touch the cache. I can try to rebuild it. How long will it take?" He looked up at me, his eyes tired. "A few days, maybe less." "I might not have days," I whispered. He gave a short, grim smile. "Then let's hope I'm faster than whoever erased it." When I returned home that night, the house was dark except for the faint glow from the cameras. I didn't turn on the lights. I didn't need to see the walls to know they were still watching. Lying in bed, I replayed everything in my mind. The beeping of the ICU monitor, the words I'd heard, the click of the bracelet, the static that replaced my proof. And yet, somewhere beneath the noise, I still heard the echo of truth that refused to die. "He buried me with his signature once," I whispered into the darkness. "He won't get to do it twice." The faint red light on the camera blinked in the corner of the ceiling. For once, I didn't look away. When the recovered audio finally played, I thought, it didn't just save me, it destroyed him. It started with a single call. Jonah's number flashed across my phone just past midnight. My hands trembled as I answered. "I got it," he said simply. "You were right." Those 4 words hit harder than I expected. For a second, I couldn't speak. My breath caught in my throat. "You're sure?" "Meet me," he said. "Now." My truck's behind the old diner on 5th. The night air was damp, cold, and oddly silent when I arrived. Jonah sat in his truck with the engine idling low. He looked different, grimmer, like a man who'd just uncovered something he wished he hadn't. He held out a flash drive. "Listen." He plugged it into the dashboard system, and the truck filled with sound. Static at first, then clear as day, my father's voice. "Just end it. She's brain dead. Nobody will question it." My heart stopped. Then came the nurse's voice, soft, frightened. "But she's still responsive, sir. Her vitals." Gareth's tone sharpened. "Do it. Or I'll find someone who will." The air in that truck grew thick. My body shook, but not from fear this time, from clarity. Jonah looked at me, his voice quiet. "This is enough to bury him." I stared out the windshield, tears sliding down my cheeks. He really wanted me gone. "People like him," Jonah said. "They think money makes them untouchable. Let's make sure he learns otherwise." The next morning, I went straight to Detective Shaw. The moment he heard the recording, he exhaled like a man who'd been holding his breath for weeks. "This is it," he said. "We can issue a warrant." But before he could finish filling out the paperwork, the front doors of the precinct opened, and Gareth walked in. Calm, composed, smiling. "She's manipulating you all," he said smoothly, addressing the room. "She's unstable. Look at her eyes." His confidence filled the room like poison. Even Shaw stiffened. I stood, my legs trembling but my voice steady. "You said I was a disappointment, Dad," I said quietly. "But I'm the only thing left that's real." Something flickered across his face, just for a moment. A crack in the mask. Then he smiled again, the kind that made my blood run cold. The officers escorted him out of the station for questioning, but I could feel his gaze on me as he passed, like a promise that this wasn't over. That evening, Shaw insisted on sending me home with a patrol car following close behind. "He's dangerous now," he warned. "Don't go anywhere alone." I nodded, but deep down, I knew he wouldn't stop. I was right. The attack came fast. Too fast. One moment I was driving down the dark stretch toward my house. The next, headlights swerved in my rearview mirror. A horn blared. The crash hit like thunder. Metal screamed, glass shattered, and the world spun. When the car finally stopped moving, I could taste blood. My ears rang. Smoke drifted from the crumpled hood. I tried the door. It jammed. I kicked it open, crawling out, my vision blurry. Then I saw him. My father, stepping out of his car, fury written across every line of his face. His suit was torn, his eyes wild. "You ruined everything," he shouted. I staggered to my feet, clutching my phone. My voice shook but didn't break. "No," I said. "You did." He lunged toward me, grabbing my arm, trying to snatch the phone. "Give it to me. You don't know what you're doing." The sirens grew louder in the distance. I could see the red and blue reflections flashing across his face. My bracelet blinked red again, transmitting live. He froze when he noticed it. "What's that?" I met his eyes. "It's the sound of you ending yourself." Within seconds, the police cars surrounded us. Officers rushed in, pulling him away as he struggled, screaming, "She's lying! She's my daughter!" I took a step back, leaning against the wrecked car, my whole body shaking. Shaw appeared beside me, steadying me with one hand. "You did it," he said quietly. I watched as they cuffed Gareth, his voice cracking now, not in anger, but in disbelief. "She's lying," he kept shouting. "She's my daughter!" "Not anymore," I whispered. "Not since you signed that paper." Days later, I sat in a hospital bed, arm in a sling, watching the news play on the small, wall-mounted TV. Local businessman Gareth Venn charged in attempted homicide of his daughter, Lucia Venn. Audio evidence confirms premeditated intent. My throat tightened as the segment played part of the recording. His voice, cold and calm, for the world to hear. Maria sat beside me, back in her uniform. She'd been reinstated after the investigation cleared her name. "You okay?" she asked softly. I looked at her, then at the screen. "He tried to silence me with machines," I said. "Now the world hears every word he said." Maria smiled faintly. "That's justice, sweetheart." I nodded, but somewhere deep inside, I knew justice wasn't the same as peace. Because survival isn't the same as healing, and I wasn't ready for what came after. Months passed before the trial began. The air that morning was sharp and cool, the kind that carried the faint scent of rain. I stood at the courthouse steps for a long moment before going inside, clutching my bracelet, a symbol of everything I had endured. Maria and Detective Shaw sat behind me in the courtroom, their presence quiet but steady. Across the aisle, my father sat in a crisp gray suit, thinner now, but still trying to look composed. When our eyes met, his expression hardened. "You've ruined this family," he hissed under his breath as the bailiff passed. I turned slightly toward him. "You ruined the word family," I said softly. "I just stopped pretending it meant something." The proceedings began. The hum of voices quieted as the judge entered, and for a while everything blurred, the lawyers' arguments, the witnesses' statements, the clinical recounting of evidence. I kept my hands folded, feeling the small ridges on my bracelet press against my skin, reminding me I was still here. Then, the judge called for the recording. The clerk pressed play. At first, only static filled the speakers. Then his voice, his real voice, cut through the silence. "Just end it. She's brain dead. Nobody will question it." A collective breath seemed to leave the room. I heard the nurse's timid protest, followed by his colder response. "Do it, or I'll find someone who will." The courtroom was utterly still. Even the sound of paper stopped. The only thing I could hear was my own heartbeat. My father's jaw tightened, but he didn't look at me. He just stared straight ahead, as if he could will the walls to swallow him whole. When the playback ended, the judge leaned forward, his expression unreadable. "That will be sufficient." The jury left for deliberation. Every minute that passed felt like a year, but when they returned, the foreman's voice was steady. Guilty on all counts. I didn't cry, I didn't cheer. I just exhaled. For the first time in years, my body didn't tremble. The judge's voice filled the room again, low, deliberate, almost weary. The law cannot mend what cruelty breaks, he said, but sometimes it can remind us that truth, no matter how long buried, still belongs to the living. As the bailiff led my father away, he turned once more. You think you've won? He said, his voice barely a whisper. I met his gaze. No, I replied. I survived. Outside, sunlight poured over the courthouse steps. Reporters shouted my name, cameras flashed, microphones reached for a statement. I paused only long enough to glance at Maria. Can we just go home? I asked quietly. She nodded, guiding me through the crowd toward her car. The drive was silent except for the hum of the tires and the rhythm of my breathing. We stopped at a small house I had rented weeks before. White curtains, pale blue walls, sunlight spilling into every corner. It was the first place that truly felt like mine. In the backyard, I dug into the soil, planting a small rose bush near the fence. My hands were unsteady, but it felt right, like closing a chapter without needing to slam it shut. Maria stood by the porch, watching. That's beautiful, she said. It's for everything I had to bury, I answered. And everything that grew back. When dusk settled, I sat on the back steps, the air cool against my skin. I took out the small box I'd brought from the hospital, a faded cardboard one that had once held my ICU bracelet. Inside, I placed a folded note. You buried me twice, with violence and with a signature, but I lived 3 times, through mercy, truth, and my own voice. I sealed the box and buried it under the rosebush. The wind brushed through the branches, and for a brief moment, I could almost hear the soft, rhythmic beeping of the ICU monitor, the sound that had once marked the line between death and survival. Now, it just sounded like peace. Weeks later, the story reached the news again. Headlines about corruption, forgiveness, and the strange quiet that follows justice. People called me brave, but bravery was never the goal. Breathing was. One morning, I stood by the window as the sun rose, the light washing the walls gold. The world outside was calm. I spoke aloud, not to anyone but to the space around me, the air that had once betrayed me and now felt forgiving. People think survival is waking up, I said, but it's not. Survival is choosing to keep breathing even after the air has turned against you. The horizon glowed brighter, and I let the warmth reach my face. I don't need revenge, I whispered. I need peace. And maybe I've finally found it. I picked up a pen and signed the last page of a journal I'd been keeping since the hospital, the one I never thought I'd finish. He signed the paper to end my life. I signed my own to start it again.